From Joe Lossett against Teamer Delver. Misty Rainforest is where things will begin here. For Lossett, he'll play a Scalding Tarn. For Li Shu, it's a Volcanic Island. And now to Delver Secrets. Now, what's interesting here to me, at least a little bit, is if you're Li Shu, you get paired against Joe Lossett. Well, if you've been paying attention at all, you know what you're playing against.
It's 85% Miracles, 15% Reanimator.
Yeah.
That's about the range.
And so what kind of hands do you keep as a result? I think that's the big question. Now, he's going to take a look at the top card. Check for Delver Secrets. It's a miss, so he's going to sacrifice his fetch land because he clearly does not like what he would be drawing. Find a Tropical Island, shuffle, new card on the way.
When Treasure Cruise was legal and fueling various red, blue, and teamer strategies, that was where I thought Miracles was at its low point, because the late game that these type of decks had, just as good as Miracles. Now, with Dig Through Time and Treasure Cruise banned, I think this matchup is now solidly in Joe's favor again.
I've always felt like it's close, but it's favorable for Miracles.
You can lose to some, a lot of creatures backed up by cheap counter spells can definitely beat you. But at least game one, Teamer Delver has a lot of dead weight in it, and as long as you can make your land drops, keep yourself flush with basics, you're going to be all right.
Dismember the reveal here for Li Shu.
2 main deck copies here. Some of the flex spots, 2 copies of Spell Pierce and 2 copies of Spell Snare, 0 copies of Gitaxian Probe.
Got it. We saw Andrew Boswell a little bit earlier in the day playing 4 copies of Gitaxian Probe and all of his Spell Pierces in the sideboard. Here's a Brainstorm from Shu. Joe giving his hand a pretty long look here. That's going to resolve. So 3 cards coming, 2 will go back here for Li Shu.
Dismember can't leave the hand fast enough, and I'm sure Lightning Bolt is right next to it.
You're not a fan of those cards, huh?
I mean, Lightning Bolt's okay because of Jace, but most savvy Miracle players, if they can play Jace on a stable board against Teamer Delver, first order business just going up.
For Joe, he's going to play a Brainstorm. He'll be drawing 3 cards. 2 will go back for the Miracle Man.
There's an interesting tension with Miracles in this matchup. You want to play around Daze and Stifle as much as possible, so you're willing to take some hits on the jaw to make your land drops not get tripped up by those sort of things. But there's only so many hits you can take from Insectile Aberration before Lightning Bolts become a big concern. So how much is Joe willing to take hits versus how much is he willing to preserve his life total? It's an interesting question.
There's the basic planes. It feels like at some point Joe just has to say, okay, fine, I'll crack my lands.
Right. And if his hand's full of Stifles and Dazes, you just might be in trouble. But you can only take so many shots like this.
He's going to take 3 more. He's going to fall down to 13. Li Shu is going to sacrifice a Flooded Strand. Fall down to 18. We'll see what land he wants to search up. It's Volcanic Island. We'll see what's next here for our Teamer Delver player. It's a Ponder. That's going to resolve. Shu will get to take a look at the top 3.
And look at Lossett's life total at 13. Getting hit in multiples of 3 when you think of Insectile Aberration and Lightning Bolt. But you have to assume at some point he's going to break one of these fetch lands. That knocks him down to 12.
Well, here's Terminus, so he's willing to wait. And here's Stifle on the Miracle trigger. And what's nice about that is Joe doesn't have to pay the mana.
Right. The way that works is the Terminus or whatever the Miracle card is in his hand. There's a trigger that goes on the stack that essentially asks Joe, do you want to cast this for the Miracle cost or not? You can stifle that trigger. The card still goes to Joe's hand. He doesn't have to spend the mana.
So he does fetch up an island with Scalding Tarn. And there might be something like a counterbalance on the way. He'll start by playing a Scalding Tarn. Now here's counterbalance.
It's a good step 1 here. Means that if Joe can answer the Insectile Aberration, he's likely to not have to worry about Lightning Bolts for the rest of the game if he can get this into play.
Force of Will. Got to remove a Spell Pierce. To me, counterbalance is such a great test spell in this matchup.
Yep.
You have other things that you have interest in resolving, but the counterbalance does resolve, it certainly changes the dynamic of the game.
Unfortunately, Joe's hand is a little chunky right now. Multiple copies of Jace the Mind Sculptor, not ideal for this matchup. You don't mind drawing one, but I think the easier way for Lossett to win this matchup is with removal into Entreat the Angels. It's hard for him to tap out for Jace right now. There's so many Spell Pierce and Daze type of cards floating around, and if his turn gets swallowed up like that, he may not be able to recover.
Joe going to sacrifice his fetches now. Looks like they're all going to resolve. Remember, he is also glutted with a Terminus in hand, too.
Yeah.
Counterbalance down. Joe also aggressively searching up basics. Now, only one plains, 4 islands out there. Just wants to make sure that he's playing safe around Wasteland.
Yeah, game one, the only thing he's really giving up here is if he draws the 1 copy of Pyroblast, he can't cast it. But getting tagged with a Wasteland when you're worried about Spell Pierces and Dazes and you got expensive spells in your hand.
Vendilion Click. See, this is where the difference comes from Joe's deck versus other Miracles decks. You take a look at Joe's version versus Reed's version. Reed 1 creature, Joe with 9. It's a world of difference. Daze going to take care of the Vendilion Click. 3 damage going to come through. Delver doing a nice job putting the pressure on. Well, that's down to 7. You mentioned you can only take so many hits.
Yep.
And those fetch lines, those add up too. He's cracked 4? At least 3. See if Joe maybe tries to go for Jace here. Here's Caracas.
Jace is a lot safer than trying to just resolve a 6-mana Terminus.
Yeah.
You're just walking into any counterspell if you do that.
Will Jace resolve? And I think that Jace is truly on summon mode here.
Yep.
Just to slow down the Delver. That's in. Yep. Get that thing out of here. Lightning Bolt gonna go after Jace. It's an expensive unsummon, but it might just be the time that he needs.
Still gets a trade with a Lightning Bolt. Lossett's got another Jace in hand. He's not, does not have to get that one to stick to be able to win the game. So I'm sure Joe happy with the exchange of resources, even though that was not the best Jace I've ever seen.
Nimble Mongoose. Can't bounce that one with Jace. Back over to Lossett we go. He'll draw a card.
It looks like Shu trying to play 1 threat at a time. Knows if he casts the second threat in hand, the Delver of Secrets, Joe is likely to just untap and cast Terminus. This Nimble Mongoose also can't be hampered in any way by Jace, so if you're going to slow roll your threats, it's probably the better one to lead with.
Counterbalance is in. There's no top out there. Here's an attack. Is it? Yeah, it's Vendilion Click again. This is actually some of the benefit to playing a creature-heavy version.
Yeah, right now the Vendilion Clicks, I mean, the first one wasn't very good, just traded with the Daze, but this one, if it sticks, pretty valuable. The creature light builds of Miracles do struggle with Nimble Mongoose. They're all on targeted removal and kind of expensive sweepers. Jace the Mind Sculptor doesn't touch it, so being able to just block and trade is very good in this matchup.
Force of Will. Removing Delver's Secrets, the Delver from earlier in the game. That's the plan here. There's a counterbalance trigger on the stack. It's Sensei's Divining Top. I'm not thrilled to see that on the other side of the table if I'm Lee Shu.
Nope. And that means if Joe wants to, he can force going down to 3, knowing that Lightning Bolt isn't a concern. Although I suppose Lee could still tag Lossett in the draw step.
And Joe will force back. Removing Jace.
And you can see what Joe's feeling here. If he can just get this trade to happen, he's got such a huge advantage with the lock set up next turn.
I feel like just a lot of the time when you're playing this matchup from the Miracle side, you're winning the game like around 5 life.
Yep.
Joe says, I'll target you with Vendilion Click. Looks like Shu's going to show him the grip. Bolt, Nimble, and Volcanic Island. And Joe with just a Terminus in hand, but at least Shu knows that. And he also knows the top card of the deck, which is Sensei's Divining Top, so the walls are closing in. Here's a block. They're going to trade.
And you see Joe not taking anything because Shu can't cast anything right now because he knows there's Divining Top on top of the deck. He can't cast anything next turn, any of these one-mana spells, because now the top's in play. So I think wise of Lossett there not to take anything.
Now, I believe Shu drew another copy of Lightning Bolt, I believe. So there are 2 Lightning Bolts there. Now the question is, does Lossett trip up at all?
I think that Lossett knows that this game is covered other than getting hit with a bunch of Lightning Bolts.
Yeah.
So I would be shocked if he took any sort of unnecessary risk here.
Lossett ready to draw. Found a copy of Monastery Mentor. Again, that's another thing that it's an added dimension in this deck that I kind of like. It's just a weird one.
Yeah.
Because Mentor just lets you close the game out so fast in combination with Top, or just in combination with you just playing Magic.
Almost every other creature that Miracles brings to the table just has value on enter the battlefield triggers or leaves battlefield triggers. This is something that can just get killed. So the opportunity cost is a bit higher here than with some other stuff, but the upshot is huge. The upside is huge.
Joe wants to draw. I have to assume there's a 1 in there somewhere.
Right.
Okay, yeah, I was going to say,
yeah.
I'm pretty sure there's a 1. It's another Sensei's Divining Top, which means he gets to go nuts.
Yep.
And just make a bunch of monks and then kill him that way. And that's exactly what he's going to do. Joe Lossett does win game number 1 here over Li Shu. Miracles up a game over Team Delver. And honestly, I feel like from the Miracle side, even though it took a little bit, he had to take some damage using life total as a resource, I feel like that's the way that the game is going to go.
That was a solid game 1 there for Lossett. It was by no means easy. He took some hits there, and there were some spots there where it was not totally clear he was going to be able to stabilize it, but took his lumps, answered stuff, and eventually Shu just had not enough cards of consequence.
To the sideboards we're going to go, which means we will start with our Teamer Delver player. That is Li Shu. And what he's working with here, he's got a Flusterstorm, 2 copies of Grafdigger's Cage, a Pithing Needle, a Pyroblast, a Red Elemental Blast, an Ancient Grudge, a Life in the Loam, a Null Rod, 2 copies of Rough Tumble, a Sulfur Elemental, a Crozen Grip, and then 2 copies of Submerge. Pretty normal stuff here.
Yeah, the anti-artifact measures here and anti-enchantment measures, the Crozen Grip, the copy of Null Rod, and the Pithing Needle, I think those are all very easy to bring in, as are the Red Blasts. I'm not a huge fan of Flusterstorm in the matchup, but that could also come in.
For Joe, he's got 3 Flusterstorms, 2 Wear Tear, 2 Red Elemental Blast, 2 Relic of Progenitus, a Sulfur Elemental, a Containment Priest, an Aethersworn Canonist, a Pithing Needle, an Instant Static Caster, and a Mountain.
2 Relic of Progenitus to star in this matchup. Very good against Nimble Mongoose and Tarmogoyf. The Red Blast and the Flusterstorms are also fine.
Pretty straightforward.
Yeah.
This is a tried and true matchup with Legacy.
Yes.
I think we've seen it all before, and these sideboards are pretty normalized for each player in their decks.
Yeah, and Lossett's got 2 stars. Like I said, Relic of Progenitus is just awesome here, and then 5 cards that are acceptable. Not spectacular, but they're more 1-for-1 trades for 1 mana. A big priority for Lossett in the matchup is just lowering his curve. That's where Teamer Delver can trip him up, especially in draws that are backed up by stifles on fetch lands and wastelands and so forth. So anything you can do to trade 1-for-1 earlier on in the game, even if they're not great 1-for-1s, Lossett will take.
Well, these players will shuffle up here for game number 2. Li Shu will be on the play with Teamer Delver, but in the meantime, we will talk about the Star City Games newsletter. It is your source for Magic the Gathering news. We see some players guest star in there, like Gerard Fabiano, and it's free to sign up for.
Yes, all the best content for Star City Games cultivated by Cedric Phillips. You get the latest going-ons of the Open Series with a selected match of the week to view. You get exclusive deck lists and advice from some of our premium columnists and an exclusive cardboard crack comic. Best of all, sign up is free over at starcitygames.com/newsletter.
For Joe Lossett, it's another weekend here in the Open Series with Miracles. He's number 5 right now on our Season 4 leaderboard. He's close to qualifying for the Players' Championship. Don't know if he's going to lock it up, but hey, you know, that win yesterday at the only game in town, that probably helped quite a bit.
Well, he said that it helped. Obviously, the points super valuable, but just from a confidence standpoint, you know, it was a tough field. His results with Miracles have not been spectacular lately, and just winning a relatively large, talented tournament was just good coming into the event this weekend.
For Joe, 36 years old from Redlands, California, 1 invitational top 8, 17 Open Series top 8s with 5 wins, 4 of which are in Standard, by the way. Varsity row with the University of Colorado, Star Wars fanatic, and he follows StarCraft 2 just as closely as he follows Magic. He just loves gaming. Does stream during the weeks as well, and just likes playing Miracles. You know, it's interesting to me a lot of the time when you know that when you get paired against someone in a format, you know they're going to be playing a certain deck. For Joe or Reed Duke, it's Miracles. For maybe someone like Alexander Hayne, you're going to be playing against Amulet Bloom, stuff like that. And it doesn't matter. They're so good with their deck.
Yeah, I mean, it's obviously valuable information to know what your opponent's going to be playing, but I would rather be very experienced with a particular deck and maybe give away a little bit of information than keep my opponent surprised but play badly.
I agree.
Got, ideally you don't have to choose between one or the other, but if you had to choose, I'd rather be experienced with a particular deck.
Hey, like you can take the Brad Nelson route, which is just play a bunch of different decks really well, or you can just play one deck. Or you can take the route of just playing one deck very, very well for a very long time. Maybe Brad's a corner case.
The Brad Nelson route is not necessarily afforded to everyone because you have to be very talented and commit a lot of time. It's not like Brad just has the right standard deck every week because he's really good at rolling dice or something. It's a lot of hours, a lot of Magic Online. I'm sure playtesting live with the rest of the Roanoke people. And not everyone necessarily has that support network or talent or inclination.
I've always just been comfortable playing one deck the entire time. Switching is always just hard for me. Maybe it shouldn't be as hard as it is, but
the games of Legacy are just so, in my opinion, they're just very hard to play. That walking in and just, I'm going to play, Jeskai Delver this weekend and just try to play well, it's not going to happen for most players.
Delver Secrets is going to transform into Insectile Aberration, and Spell Pierce is the reveal here for Li Shu. He's coming across for 3. Looks a lot like game number 1. No green mana just yet, however. Lossett will draw. A Plains here for Joe. And now Relic of Progenitus, a card you felt was an all-star. Had a feeling it was going to come in.
Yep. Shu doesn't necessarily have to fight over this because he's just on Insectile Aberration, has no green mana, so his graveyard-centric threats aren't really an issue right now. But if he just wants to trade 1 for 1 and cast something, not waste his mana, it's a fine card to counter.
Spell Pierce did take care of the artifact. No land here for Lee, just going to pass the turn back. Lossett picked up a copy of Jace. You do see a Pyroblast in hand, so it does have an answer to the Insectile Aberration, and as you can see with the Arid Mason in hand, the mana isn't an issue just yet either, though Stifle is a consideration.
Yeah, no guarantee that Lossett gets to red.
In for 3 more, Lossett's going to fall down to 11. Now this is interesting, because it looks like Shu does have a Misty Rainforest in hand, and picked up a copy of Nimble Mongoose for the turn, just not electing to play either.
I'm a little surprised. I mean, not playing the Nimble Mongoose, if you're worried about a sweeper, I can get behind that. But with Lossett potentially having Spell Pierces and Fluster Stones of his own, I would just want to get the land onto the table.
Maybe it'll come back to bite him. We'll see. He does have a copy of Spell Snare in hand. Lossett going to cast a Brainstorm right now. He's drawing his cards, so he just got to figure out what he wants to put back. And he does have the fetch land to make it a perfect Brainstorm.
Though again, not necessarily.
Yep.
Could just get Stifle.
I'm always curious how many Stifles you're supposed to leave in against this deck. Miracle triggers, fetch lands.
I think it's probably all 4 just because you have weaker cards. You have Bolts and Dismembers. Those seem easier to cut than Stifle. And once the Miracle deck starts getting its mana online, I understand you're not going to be able to Stifle for value in every single game you play. Sometimes it's going to be pretty bad, but when I see Delver win this matchup, it's because they got out on top of them early and then just attacked their mana. That's the best route. So I think you have to leave in cards like Stifle, maximize the chance of that happening.
Brainstorm's done resolving. Land number 4 here for Joe is an island. Pass the turn back. There's Misty. Here come the beatdowns. Swords of Plowshares is going to take care of it. So it looks like Joe's willing to say, you know what, I'm going to take some hits, get some mana out there so I can play around Spell Pierce, Daze, all that nonsense. Down to 11. Chances of you burning me out, especially after sideboard, pretty low.
Yep. And Lossett knows the easiest way for him to lose this matchup is to pick a battle at an inopportune time and lose to Temur Delver's just overall mana efficiency. So take some hits there and then cast Swords to Plowshares with 3 mana up. Try to work the game that way and avoid the Spell Pierces and Dazes from being disastrous.
Looks like it's time for a Tarmogoyf here. And that's going to resolve for Shu. So back to Lossett, well, it's almost like he knew that was there. Brainstorm, a very powerful Magic card. Here's Stifle. That means it's going to go in the hand. But what this means more importantly is that the shields are down here for Shu.
That's a big victory here for Lossett, as now his fetch land is unlocked. And the Stifle didn't even really trade 1-for-1 because the game's probably going to go on long enough for that hardcast Terminus to be a thing. I mean, the window is open here for Lossett to resolve something very good.
And we might see Jace. He also has Snapcaster Mage, plus Source of Plowshares. A lot of options here for Joe.
I think I'm not a huge fan of Jace in this spot because it's likely that Shu just goes untap bolted, untap red blasted. This is a guaranteed value play here from Lossett.
I suppose it's possible if there are some bolts left over, and it actually has a bolt in his hand.
Yeah.
Even though it's a sideboarded game, sometimes we see players board out Lightning Bolt, sometimes we don't.
Or they have in 2 or something like that. And with Lossett showing Vendilion Click and Monastery Mentor, it's possible Shu feels like he needs to leave in more bolts than you would commonly like to in this matchup.
If you know the version that Joe plays.
Yeah.
He's got so many creatures in his deck, 3 Snapcasters, 3 Vendilion Clicks, 2 Vensers, 1 Monastery Mentor, though it's unclear what his configuration is after sideboard. So both players kind of playing a bit of a guessing game as here's a Nimble Mongoose. Only 3 cards in the graveyard right now for Shu. Gonna go back over to Lossett. He'll draw a card. Always gotta be careful how you draw cards when you're playing Miracles, Terminus, Entreat the Angels. That one's not a miracle even though it feels like it sometimes. That's a Jace. Pyroblast. Joe.
No, Joe.
No, he doesn't.
The Jace.
He doesn't want to kill your
The
Snapcaster
Jace,
Mage.
Joe, not the Snapcaster Mage. Thanks for asking. Appreciate trying to keep the game state clean.
Clarification is key. He's got a red elemental blast that Brainstorm. Take care of that. 5 cards in the graveyard here for Shu. Lightning Bolt will take care of the Snapcaster Mage. That'll allow Nimble Mongoose to come across for 1. Back to Lossett we go. He'll draw. Not a miracle. Terminus, Jace. Looks like a Pyroblast over there for Lossett.
With the Nimble Mongoose threatening to go to Threshold next turn, I think if this Jace resolves, Lossett is going to plus it and Fate Seal. If you Fate Seal, that probably gets an attack out of Shu. Then you can untap and Brainstorm. Hopefully find some sort of answer to the Mongoose. If not, you've at least gotten a little bit of value out of Jace. This is a pretty common play pattern with this card.
Force of Will, removing Spellstorm. Those are the last 2. And Joe's got that blast effect in his hand.
Yep.
To force Jace
And
through.
now this is a really juicy spot to Fate Seal. Now you can actually go after Shu here if you want to.
And he's immediately going up to 5.
Shu with no way to shuffle the deck.
Terminus Vendilion Click here in Lossett's hand.
Great setup again for Lossett. He's got some opportunities next turn between Vendilion Click and Terminus to trade with the Nimble Mongoose. At that point, it's Jace against nothing. A commanding position.
I actually kind of like Shu going after Lossett's life total here. I don't think he gets anywhere by trying to attack Jace.
Totally agree. And because Lossett just gets to untap and Brainstorm, it's just so likely that the Mongoose gets answered. In fact, Shu still knows about the Terminus in hand. So all Lossett would need is land number 6 anyway. So at least try to get Lossett low. Hopefully some bolts or other creatures off the top can finish off the game.
The Terminus in hand, that might be the Terminus on top of the deck. We might be headed that way. Two cards going to go back here for Joe. An island. And now it's a counterbalance. Still has Vendilion Click in hand. Might have interest in just casting this now.
Yeah.
He knows the card that he knows the card that Shu drew. So he knows that it's clear for takeoff.
And it's way more important for Vendilion Click to just trade with the Nimble Mongoose than it is for the Vendilion Click to do anything of value.
And the card that he drew was Flusterstorm. Joe doesn't care much about that one. Shu will draw. Vendilion Click at the ready to block that Nimble Mongoose. I just passes the turn back. The brakes are on. Counterbalance to draw here for Lossett. See if he wants to go Brainstorming, Fate Sealing. He's going to go Brainstorming. Terminus is the first draw. Another 2 are new. Don't have a great look at him, though. There's a fetch land in there. Looks like Wear Tear might be one of them. Wear Tear's a pretty hard lock.
Yep.
There's just no top out there yet.
Also, occasionally Temur Delver has Sulfuric Vortex in the sideboard. It's a very problematic card for Miracles if it resolves. So in there for that reason, even though it looks a little odd, you know. Not a whole lot of enchantments or artifacts in the deck, but the one that Shu could potentially have is a big one.
Brainstorm, counterbalance trigger. It's Wear Tear. That costs 1 or 2.
Very good with counterbalance.
Yeah.
It's a combo, and in fact, it's a lock.
That's going to do it. Joe Lossett's going to win this match here over Li Shu 2-0. Miracles will take down Temur Delver for Lossett. He's on a 7-1. He's locked up day number 2, and it might be another top 8 for him.
Yeah, and you can see he knows his way around this matchup.
Oh, yeah.
Makes sense. You're going to play against a lot in Legacy. So knowing how your deck matches up against Temur Delver is really important. And Lossett, you can see, just took his lumps, made his land drops, and made every effort to make sure that cards like Stifle and